Now, I guess, how quickly did your unit actually get into combat, and what kinds of things were going on while you were there?
We got into combat first night. And we were out 45 days. And out of those 45 days, there may have been 5 or 6 evenings that we didn't have contact, and that was because it was raining. So they were bogged down as well as we were, and that was why.
All right. Now, would you move during the day and set up defensive positions for the night, or what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're talking about having contact at night. So the enemy would be attacking you at night?
Yes.
Okay.
Or we would set up as a company, and a company would have 4 platoons, and we could set out anywhere from a 4-man team to a 25-man team. Either to look for or force the enemy to either move or engage. I was involved in a couple of what they call stingrays. There was 4 people. And we'd go out and go way out. Find a little bit of high ground. Camouflage. There'd be a person with an automatic weapon. There'd be a sergeant. There'd be myself and the forward observer. And our whole being out there was to find troop movement, catalog that movement. When it was safe for us, call in either artillery or airstrikes on that movement. And make sure that if that movement was heading toward anyone in particular, that they knew it. Now, if we knew there was troops, where they had to know that these people were coming to them.
Okay. And were you able to do that successfully on those missions?
We did. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a sense of how large the enemy formations were that you were observing, or could you not tell?
It was. I couldn't react. It was hard to tell. It was hard to tell size. Mostly, you were getting shadows, and you were getting the few people that walked a little heavier than others. And you'd have their NCOs and officers giving orders. So you knew there was something out there. Was people out there that were more than just a couple of guys. And you could tell their direction.
All right. Now, when the enemy attacked your positions at night, how would they go about doing that?
They'd wait till it was really quiet. And they were very good at stealth. And it would seem like that they were right on top of you when the whistles would start blowing. And then the next thing you knew, everything would open up on both sides.
And was it normal for them to, that sounds like a fully fledged infantry attack or assault.
It was.
And
yeah.
Did they also use mortars or rockets or snipers or things like that?
some, depending on the size of their attack, if they had a larger group, uh, they would rocket mortar before they came in. The same as what we would do. The so-called softening up before the attack. Oh yeah. And you just, everybody's in holes, big holes.
Okay.
Become one with the ground.
All right. Now, how serious did these attacks get? Would they break into your positions at times, or?
I know of, man. I know of twice that I called in. Once I called in artillery almost on top of us in our position. And another time I called in airstrikes, and we had to make sure that we had deep holes because we were using napalm within 100 yards.
What was the normal safe distance to drop napalm at?
Yeah, somewhere around 1,000 yards.
Yeah. Okay. Now, during this time, you're in Gono Island for like a month and a half or whatever. Would you move around and join different platoons and companies, or did you stay with the same group for a long chunk of time?
We stayed within ourselves, but we would meet up with other units. That would have been part of our job, is they would sweep one way and we would sweep another. And when we came together, we had that area cleared. And then they would have us either go one way or the other, but we wouldn't really stay together.
Well, I guess I was asking, did you get assigned to a specific company or platoon and just stay with that specific group of guys for the whole time, or would they assign you to different units within the battalion?
Yeah, different units within the battalion. I had one company that I pretty much stayed with the most, because they had a couple of lieutenants in there that preferred Fred and myself, and they would call for us. But for the most part, our CO would just, he'd come down to you, and you. This is where you guys have to go, and then that's where we would go.
And then how would they move you? Because Gono Island is not that big an area necessarily. How would they move you from one unit to another?
Well, that 45 days we were out there, I stayed with one unit there.
Okay. Okay.
During the time I was in Vietnam, I guess was where I was going to say I was with different units.
All right. Okay. So you did have one company or whatever that you stayed with.
One company, yes.
Okay. And which company was that? Do you remember?
Alpha.
Okay.
A company.
All right. And over the course of those 45 days, what kind of losses did a company take?
Well, luckily it wasn't as much as Delta Company, but that's where I wish I had that book. Wow. Maybe 20 or 25%.
Is that killed and wounded badly enough to leave? Yeah. Okay.
I know that, well, for the whole battalion as a whole, when we were done with Operation Allenbrook, we were never up to strength after that. And we didn't really know the reason. We kept sending word back up. We needed replacements. And the only reason we didn't get them was because the higher-ups knew that our battalion, the colors were going to be lowered and the company disbanded. And shortly, within months after that happened.
Okay. Now, over the course of that operation, how much damage did you inflict on the enemy?
That it's kind of hard to tell. It really is. I know that our company, I know for sure we had at least 4 POWs. The kill ratio, it had to have been a lot. We could find trails, but it was awfully hard to find bodies. They were very good at removing the people wounded and killed. At one point, I know we found an underground hospital. When the Army engineers blew it up, it covered almost 4 acres. And when we found it, there was a table down there with cards. There was operating tables with fresh blood they had been working on wounded when we found it, when people came through.
How would you find the underground stuff?
We were walking in a unit, somebody stepped on a trip, or on a hatch, a door, and we had people small enough that they were the ones that went through the tunnel. Luckily, I was too big.
All right. Now,
And he went, there was a couple of them went down through there and came back and says, "You won't believe what we found." And
now, during the day, as you're moving around, you're looking for the enemy. I mean, would you ever find enemy forces and engage them during the day, or did they
Yes.
stay away? Okay.
yeah.
And how would that play out?
Well, actually, it wasn't a whole lot better than that night. It was a little more visual, but there was so much of the foliage. There was one whole area that had at least 6 foot high and better of elephant grass. And what rice fields were left were overgrown because, well, they couldn't harvest it. And there was a lot of concealment for both sides. So it really made it difficult to say that, "Oh, I see you," and you just set up a field of fire, and whoever could force the action the most, that's.
And would they sometimes ambush your forces by day?
Oh, yeah. They tried. They always tried. But we never went to. If we found a trail, we marked them on maps, and we never went down the same trail twice. That was clear indication. Doing that was a perfect recipe for an ambush or
Booby trap or something like that.
IEDs and yeah.
Okay. Now, were there still any civilians left in that area at that time?
There was only one area, and that was early on. And I still have the little papers that they flew over and dropped. I got a couple of them at home, telling the people that, if you don't leave, you're considered a sympathizer and will be treated as enemy. So we only had just that one village that we had to search, and we searched and destroyed. And but the people had been displaced.
Mm-hmm.
They had taken them to, wherever.
So the idea was to clear everyone and everything out of this area completely.
Oh yeah, yeah. Push the enemy out, force them to leave, and well, by then, if you do that and you do it successfully, civilians can come back, and they can have their, their farmer life. And
All right. So what then did your unit do after Allen Brook? What comes next?
Well, we came back. We all had to get resupplied, rested. And we went up to a little hill between Wei and Fubai. And we secured an area just between Highway 1 and the ocean. There was a pretty good sized hill, and the 101st Airborne built Camp Eagle right there. And we secured the area for them, for their engineers to build all their buildings. And
Okay, and at that point, was the enemy mostly cleared out of that area?
well, you know, we found trails, some of them fresh, some not. And of course, we set our own booby traps. We only had one sniper bullet, just one out of a whole month. So I think we were keeping it pretty clear, you know, keeping the enemy at bay. But I know that after we left, they got overrun the first night after we left. So they were sitting in wait somewhere.
So
And why they did that, why they, you know, and not come to us. We had been there longer. Why didn't they hit us?
well, maybe because you were there
That's
longer.
still a question in my mind. Is I don't understand why they didn't hit us, and they waited until the 101st Airborne came in there and they hit them, and they hit them hard and bad.
Well, it's possible. I thought these guys didn't know how to do security or something might be an easier target.
Yeah,
But however it works, you dodged that particular bullet.
correct.
Okay. What did your unit then do after that?
That was basically about the last that we did, besides a few patrols after we got back. And that was,
Isn't it your chronology would look like about July of '68 that you
Yeah,
had
it
been
was-
in that area?
and then that was, by the time we got back, was from there. Yeah, it was July, toward the end of July. I had August. I didn't do much in August. They knew I was leaving the first part of September. What happened for me, well, for everyone, when we left Hawaii, we didn't get a leave to go home. So because we did not get a leave to come home, they granted us every 2 months that we were in Hawaii would count as 1 month in Vietnam. So I only had, 6 months for a full tour in Vietnam. So I was getting short, so they kind of left me alone. My time was coming up, and first part of August, I ran a couple of patrols. Then after that, they just said, make sure you get your shots in order and turn in all your stuff, and just take it easy. And because the whole unit was not going to be involved in much, because it was maybe a month after I left that the whole unit was disbanded and the colors came back to San Diego.
Right. And so the men who had not been with the unit as long as you were in Hawaii as long, some of them would have stayed on in Vietnam with other units. And then other
Correct.
guys go into your unit and then it goes home. Okay. But you go in ahead of them. So how do they get you back to the States then?
Now they flew me to Okinawa. I picked up my uniforms and all that. When we were on board ship, we had to take everything we owned, except what we were going to carry with us on land to Vietnam, and box them up and leave them on board ship. And the ship went back to Okinawa and dropped all that off. So I left Da Nang Airport, flew into Okinawa, and got all my dress uniforms and that. Got my records updated. They keep you there only like 4 days, and they ship you home.
Okay. And so did you go in a chartered civilian aircraft or military aircraft?
It was both times it was a civilian aircraft, but they were chartered. I flew Braniff when I left Da Nang, and I can't even remember which one I flew out of Okinawa.
Okay.
But we landed in L.A. and we get into a whole nother story.
Yeah. So what does happen? You land in L.A. Now, did you land actually at the Los Angeles airport, or did you land? Okay.
At the airport.
And what happens then when you get off the plane?
They well, we had, back then, they didn't have the big arms, the ports. And so we got off the plane, and man, everybody was so glad to be home. And then there was the protesters.
And where were the protesters?
Oh, just 20 feet up above us, throwing stuff, spitting at us. And I don't think that I had ever been so mad, disappointed all my life. That was right then.
Now, was there any of that going on at the Los Angeles airport when you had first gone through the other way, when you went out to San Diego?
When we left, well, we boarded. When I left LA, we had a charter flight to go to Hawaii. So, I mean, they had a busload of us,
Mm-hmm.
or a couple busloads, and they just bust us right out to a plane, loaded us up,
Okay.
away we went.
All right. And then when you got back, you come back, you encounter the protesters. Did you have any idea that was going to happen?
We kind of knew some of the stuff that was going on, but I don't think any of us expected the reaction to us. All the protesting that was going on was kind of early toward us. It was still the racial riots and we were hoping to avoid those just to get home. My partner was African American, and him and I were like brothers. And we're saying, man, these people are doing stuff that, we don't even want to get caught up in, because we don't have this going on. And, and then we come home, and then there's that. And so it was something kind of different that we expected. I mean, because we knew about Detroit and Philadelphia, and we knew about those, but we weren't quite ready for them to turn on us that quick.
All right. So where do you go from Los Angeles then?
I came home for a
Okay.
leave.
And did you go home in uniform or did you change clothes?
I came home in uniform. Well, I had to. I didn't have anything else.
And did you have any other issues or problems after that first arrival?
Well, yeah, not really a problem. I got on the plane. They gave me my seat, and this young lady, there was like 3 seats. This young lady sat down by the aisle, and we got up in the air, and I asked her if she wanted a drink, and she said sure, and we had a drink. And she said, "Oh, you're in the Army?" I said, "No, I'm in the Marine Corps." And she just way over into the aisle. And, you know, I said, "Ma'am," I said, you know, and she was young, but "What's the matter?" "Well, I can't talk to you. I can't be near you." And "What? Are you kidding me?" So, yeah. Says, "You guys are just, you're murderers and you're baby killers." I said, "No, no, no, no." And so I, talked to her. By the time we got to Chicago, we were friends. We shook hands, and whew, wow, I thought, this is, it's getting to be different.
Okay. Now, how long a leave did you get home?
I had 20 days.
Okay. And what did you do after those 20 days?
I had to go to North Carolina, Camp Lejeune. And it was not bad down there. Except they were talking about going on a Mediterranean cruise training. And I had already been on board ship more than I wanted to be. If I'd have been in the Navy, going on ship would have been fine. But troop transports they're gross. And to say lightly, they're gross. And, to tell you how bad they are, I made a choice between going on a med cruise and going back to Vietnam, and I went back to Vietnam.
All right. Now, did you get any additional training or do anything special while at Camp Lejeune, or were you just marking time?
That's pretty much marking time. And once I signed all the papers and got things done, and they knew I was going to go back to Vietnam, I went home on another leave and went out to California. And there was a whole company that was going to Vietnam. And there was only 4 of us out of that whole company that had been to Vietnam before.
And what company? Was this the company you were going to serve with, or were you just sharing a plane with
we
them?
were just replacement company.
Okay.
And, I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to do. Just make up my bed, make sure my locker was straightened up, and I was good. For a month, I didn't have to do anything.
So you were were you in California at that time, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Back at Camp Pendleton.
And did any of them ask you anything about what it was like in Vietnam? Did you talk much about that?
Well, a few guys did. Most guys they were just too scared about going. They didn't want to really know, I guess.
Okay.
And but I did a few things though. They had expanded their escape and evasion course, and I said, "Yeah, I'll volunteer for this. I want to be an aggressor. I want to go out and have fun with these guys."
So what did that involve?
I put on a little black suit, like a little VC, and went out and hid and caught a couple of them. And that was fun.
Okay. Well, what were they doing? I mean, what
Well, they had to go from point A to point B and not get caught. And they had to use the experience that lessons that they had been taught. Well, if they got caught, they weren't paying attention in class too well. It was fun.
Okay. Now, when that month ends and they go over, do you fly over or take another?
Yes, well, we flew. We flew. And That's when I got assigned to headquarters company up 3rd Marine Division.
Okay. And when did you get back to Vietnam?
That was right around first part of February,
Of what year?
69.
Okay. So early 69. And then where was the headquarters of the 3rd Marine Division
Quang
based?
Tri.
Okay. There. And where is Quang Tri in Vietnam?
Oh, well, it's pretty much up in the north. Well, Way, and they're all north of Da Nang, and Quang Tri's up above there yet.
That's sort of the largest town immediately south of North Vietnam, so you're
Yeah.
pretty far up. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're based up there. So what were you doing now with that?
I had a school training. We were gonna, the Marine Corps was gonna start using seismic intrusion devices. A little transmitter, a little box, a real fine, thin antenna, and put those along a trail, maybe 100 feet apart. And then you go back from it 1,000 yards where you're safe and preset an artillery strike on it and designated a letter or a number, whatever. And you have a readout box that will, all those little transmitters are assigned a number, maybe 01, 02, 03, 04. And you can differentiate between the wind and the rain and people by the way the numbers come across. And when you notice troop movement, call in artillery on it. Like most of our artillery was coming from Sea Camp. No, it was just south of us. Little Camp Charlie. Yeah, it was Battery C. They had their we had too big of weapons. We had like 8-inch self-propelled by us. That we couldn't use those. Well, we could, but so we'd call down there and tell them, to fire on Alpha Bravo 1, and they'd look it up and they'd have all the settings for their weapons.
Okay. So you would actually go out into the jungle along the trails and plant these devices?
Yes.
Okay. And how dangerous was that?
Well, as it turned out, not as dangerous as I thought it was going to be, because nothing happened while we were out doing it, which was fortunate. But
We're getting. Okay. All right.
But I believe a lot of it too was that we knew what to look for as far as booby traps and IEDs and stuff, tripwires. So if they were there, they were avoided. And we avoided, while we were doing that, we avoided any troop movement too, because we were a relatively small group and we weren't prepared for contact.
Did you have any infantry with you as escorts, or did you go?
Oh
by
yeah,
yourselves?
there would maybe a squad, but yeah, it was all light. We just didn't carry much. We didn't carry a lot of ammunition. We didn't even carry a lot of food. We were only going to be out there for 3-4 hours. So we didn't want contact to make us have to stay out there and get hungry that night.
But then did somebody have to stay somewhere near those things to monitor that, or could you do that from a
No,
base?
no, that was miles away. Yep.
Okay.
And that was all Army equipment. I think they were getting better equipment, and that was why, you know, that stuff had to go somewhere. So yeah, we'll give it to the Marine Corps. They can use it. So, yeah,
Now, how well did it actually work? Did you find things?
very
this way?
well. I know of twice that when we called in different artillery strikes, we got feedback that troop movement had went back across north across the DMZ. They had seen them go. So they didn't have time to build up anything to come toward us.
All right.
We also had ground radar jeeps, and we averted the North Vietnamese setting up artillery just at the edge of North Vietnam. They were getting ready to fire on us, and this ground radar, all of a sudden, he's seen things dropping. What the heck? What's this stuff coming down? And we fired one round, because it would give you coordinates and everything. And we fired one round, and there was like 3 explosions. And that was from Camp Charlie with a 105. And we told our guys with the 8-inch self-propelled to just fire for effect with the big guns. And we had there was 2 of the ground radar jeeps, and we had like 4 people at each one, and everybody had a pad and paper and count explosions. And nobody had less than 120 explosions out of 100. Yeah, about 100 rounds. And they they had a spotter plane, a little Piper, fly over there the next morning, and they had pictures of Russian-made 175s, real long-barreled artillery, just all mangled up. And of course, the secondary explosions was the munitions that was dropped with it.
All right. So that's a fairly effective tool in its own
Very.
right. And basically, you could just drive the Jeep out to wherever you wanted it to set up and survey an area.
Yeah, well, no, we stayed like at Cantin was a base camp.
Mm-hmm.
It was right along the DMZ, and it was a built-in camp.
Okay.
And that's, you know, when we used those, we were in that type of a area, built in.
So did that have some
We
higher
had
ground?
bunkers, and we had.
But you have higher ground, you could position the radar on?
Cantin was a hill.
Yeah. Okay, so
Correct.
natural observation point.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And now in this area, again, was this pretty much free of civilians because it's close to the DMZ, or were there still civilians around?
Well, there was a few Montagnards. They would come in, and we'd give them food and stuff like that, and they'd leave and go back up to the hills where they lived. But there wasn't many. You had to go further down the road to find the civilians. There's too much had been blown up around that Cantin from past when we were there. There just was hardly nothing left.
Okay. Now, the time that you were up in that area around Cantian, did the enemy make many attempts to probe or attack your positions or harass them?
No, but that was because of the intrusion devices. But that's what they were trying to do when they were coming around through there, and we picked them up. They were preparing to do that. The artillery that we found and the troops that had been seen going back across the DMZ going back north. That's what they were planning to do, was to plan an attack on us.
Okay. Now, how long did this second tour last?
Well, there again was only about 6 months.
Okay. And then basically, did you stay with your battalion the whole time, or did you get an R&R at some point?
Not really an R&R. When I left that area of Cantien, I went to a mountain over by Laos. And all it was just the top had been flattened. There was a couple of bunkers to sleep in, and the rest, the few bunkers were radar and communications. And all you did was stand watch. That's all there was to do.
Okay. That's not R&R. That's just a different job.
That's not R&R. That's yeah, and but everybody had to take their turn at that. And so by the time I had the training, I'd been up to Cantien for at least 2 months up there, and it was getting close time to come home again.
Mm-hmm. Now,
But
did much happen while you were on that hilltop on the border? Or?
up there on that hilltop, nothing really happened up there. It was pretty quiet. It was quiet.
All right.
We noticed movement once that we could see, and I think they had tunneled past it on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Well, one time we caught movement, and we called in air support, but it didn't do any good. Never did, but you had to do it. So.
Okay. Now, over the course of the time when you were in Vietnam and in both tours, how would you characterize the morale of the units that you were serving with?
Yeah, I would say that for the most part, people I was with were the morale was, we were all in good spirit one way or another. We were always a team, because it wasn't so much for just you to come home, but you do your job well enough for as many of these people with you to come home too. That was what you had to do. And almost everybody I worked with had that same mentality. What I'm doing is not so much for me, but I have to do what I do and do it correctly, and help as many of my brothers come home as I can. And if I can do that, maybe I can come home with them.
Okay. And the units that you served with, because you mentioned this at least indirectly already, were there racial tensions or issues, or did people of different races get along well?
You know, there could be and was racial tension. But it was of your own making. Myself, I didn't have a problem. I got along. I tried to fit in either way. I didn't try to be better or different. We're just here, and we're all trying to do the same thing. So what are you mad about and what are you mad about? That's how, and you had to, or you were going to bring that conflict with you out in the field. And if you had a conflict here, and you had a conflict out in the field, and then you had a conflict with the Vietnamese, how many conflicts do you want to fight and have a chance to come home? And I avoided as many of those conflicts as I could, because there were going to be enough of them forced on me.
So you were aware of other people who didn't follow that policy?
There were. Yes, there were.
Okay. Now, was there more trouble in the second tour just because it was after all the stuff that had happened in '68, or did you see things at about the same level?
I didn't see anything on my second tour because the unit I was with was predominantly Caucasian. I can't even remember an African American in our unit. And why that is, I still wonder, why is that? I don't know. But there wasn't. And so we had no problem. I don't know.
Okay.
That's
All right.
that was a hard one.
Okay. Another one of the sort of the stereotypes about Vietnam is that lots of people are using drugs. And did you see much of that in the places you were?
There were a couple people that got pretty heavy into drugs. As far as I went, I dabbled a little bit with marijuana. But you had to have a release. Boy, you were living on the edge so hard, and you couldn't go get any liquor. They wouldn't serve it. You couldn't buy it in the Marine Corps. You could sit there and watch other branches of the service and even Vietnamese in front of you buy it, but you couldn't. I couldn't. But I could walk down the street and I could see Mama San, and she would have a little packet of 10 pre-rolled marijuana cigarettes for $10. And I'm good for a week. But we always had to know that there was a time and a place for it, just like there was a time and a place to have a drink. I don't know of anybody that I worked with had anything on a patrol, on anything outside of the base camp.
Could Marines get beer as opposed to hard liquor?
If it was available, we could get it. We could get beer. We could go up to Freedom Hill and get, a case of beer. But you had to get there.
Yeah.
And we had a small PX at our base camp, but it was almost empty all the time of everything. I mean, toothpaste, and so you had to try to get to Freedom Hill and overstock on personal items, and when you did that, that's where your money went.
Okay, so there's no beer ration in the Marine Corps.
We had a beer ration. When we came back from Allenburg, because we were gone so long, there was finally a build-up in the PX, and we had some cold beer in there. Finally. But, after that, when that was gone, it was, started getting hard to find again,
Okay. Did you ever have any South Vietnamese military working with you as interpreters or anything else, scouts?
One, twice, twice. I worked with Arvin, and they were pretty good. The ones we worked with. I know a lot of people had experience with them running and not doing their share, and the ones that were with us held their own, and they were good people.
What were they doing?
Their actual job was to show us the area so we didn't get lost, and to work with us and help us find trails. And then, when we found them, what to expect, what to look for. I guess they were a training mechanism for us. That's when we used them. And it worked for us.
Okay, so you used them like early on when you were learning this stuff, or did you have them
Yes,
on Gonoy
no,
Island?
early on, yes.
Okay, but you didn't have any with you on Gonoy Island?
I didn't. Our unit didn't. Well, yeah, we had some interpreters. We did. Not many, but we had interpreters. With the headquarters, yeah, we had interpreters there.
Now, and then were you ever in a situation where you did get to see much of the civilian population?
After Allenbrook, and when we went up to that little hill up there, and we had to go down the hill, across Highway 1, into this little village, and use their well to get water. And we would always take food, and we'd always take Doc with us. And every time we went, and you'd take some chocolates or something down for the kids. You'd take some extra sea rations and stuff down for the families. And Corman would, help as much as he could with whatever sickness or ailments, and so we did that for a month. So, and we made sure we were resupplied with medical items, sometimes over and above what a regular corpsman needs, just to help take care of them. But yeah.
And overall, what kind of impression did you have of the Vietnamese people?
You could see them both ways. Some of them they were glad you were there. They knew why you were there. They were the ones that wanted you there. And you had others that, look what you've done to us, and we want you to just pack up and head home.
All right. Now, to think back at the time that you spent in Vietnam, are there other particular incidents or memories that kind of stand out in your mind that you haven't brought into the story yet?
I know I'm probably missing a bunch. Wow.
All right. Well, for the moment, then, let's move on.
Yeah.
You get to the end of that second tour. Now, is the expectation that you're going to get discharged after that, or stay in?
Yeah, no, it's separation. It's time to move on.
Did they make any effort to get you to re-enlist?
In a way, yes, but not far enough. We had 2 Army generals come up to Con Thien to make sure that, in their eyes, we were doing what they expected with their equipment. And I wound up with a letter of recommendation for promotion. So when it came time to leave, I tried to barter a little bit with my CO. I said, you know, if you'll give me that recommendation and promote me, I'll extend my tour in Vietnam. And he says, man, I can't do that, because if you extend, I have to give you a rank. And we can't give you two ranks that close together. And I said, sir, if I'm doing my job well enough and you need my position, you don't need a Lance Corporal doing it, you need a sergeant doing it. I just can't do it. I can give you E4 if you extend. So, well, you know, what about that? What about that letter for a meritorious promotion? That don't mean anything? Well, I said, maybe later. I said, they didn't write that for later on down the road, sir. I can't do it. I said, well, then I guess it's time for me to move on. And it was.
Well, it was a recommendation from an Army person, right? So.
Well, yeah, but it was two Army generals, not just not just a fly-by-night guy.
All right. So you're going out. Okay. So now, what was this trip home like?
Entirely different. I landed in Okinawa, which was a military air base, to a military base. And I flew into El Toro, which is a military air station. And I stayed there until they processed everything. And I had a chance to go to the store, get some civilian clothes. And I came home in civvies instead of a uniform.
People still tell you were military just by haircut and
You
the
know,
rest?
yeah, I think they probably could, but I don't think there was I know there, even though they could tell, there wasn't the instant animosity. He's in civvies and he's just moving on through, and you just go. Move through LA airport, and you get looks, but they'd be over there hollering at somebody else, and I'd just holler back, man, leave that guy alone. They'd look at me, and I just keep walking on. I'd do a little bit of my part, and they knew, but they, he's in civvies, I'll leave him alone. I got to Chicago, it was the same way, and I think they could tell by your attitude. Even if it was not a aggressive attitude, just by the way you carried yourself, I think they could tell. But that's okay. I mean, I still carry myself that way today, and I probably, I know I will. That'll be the way I carry myself the rest of my life.
Okay. Now, what did you do after you got back home?
I had big plans. I was going to draw unemployment, and I was going to do nothing and wander around for a while. And I was home for about a week, and I had a job.
And what sort of job did you get?
Yeah, I was just a worker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a while before I started getting some initiative. I had taken my GED over in Hawaii, but I went back to my high school and took a few night classes, and I got my diploma from my high school. And I used the GI Bill, which that was a great program. I went to Muskegon Community College and I got my associate degree while I was working, had a family. And yeah, went 2 years in Grand Valley.
All right, and what kind of work did you go into?
I had, well, yeah, I have a journeyman's card as a carpenter, which that's awfully hard to use. I wound up leaving Muskegon, the place I was working for, went out of business, and I came to Holland, and I started at the very bottom of a manufacturing plant, automotive supplier, and I made my way into the engineering department, process engineer. So I had to rethink my whole training program, my head. Made it.
Now, did you have any trouble just adjusting to being a civilian?
Oh, I had terrible. It was the big thing that helped was both Muskegon Community College and Grand Valley had counselors, and they had people that had already been in the service that were there that you could go and talk to, and you could associate with another veteran. Grand Valley was huge on the amount of veterans that were going to school there. And it made it a lot easier to, well, you didn't get the looks, you didn't get the challenges, you didn't get the aggression. You got a chance. And then there it was up to you. Whereas, you go in the workplace and for the most part, you had those people out there that still had the mentality of the
anti-war movement.
yeah, big time. And
So,
and I lost out on at least 3 really good positions in the workplace because I had on my application that I was not only a Vietnam veteran, but I was a combat veteran. Of course, Marine Corps that didn't help either.
so actually being in college was a more supportive environment than being in the workplace for a while. Just sort of the opposite of what we usually expect, I guess.
Yeah, I think if I had taken the time and went down to say University of Michigan, I don't know if that would have worked. They were really passive down there in Ann Arbor. I don't know how well that would have worked. Things worked better for me where there were other veterans.
All right. And now, as you look back on things now, how do you view your time in the Marine Corps?
I'm glad I did it, but I wouldn't do it again. It made me a better person. I grew up it took me from a child to a man. I did it in a short period of time. It taught me to take care of myself, but it also gave me the ability to take care of others along the way. There's a lot of lessons to be taken from being in the service. If you can learn them, if you can accept them, and
Have you got anything?
Yeah, if it's okay to back up a little bit. When you went out on Ganoi Island, and you said that you were out there to keep them from going into the city so you didn't have to do house to house again, what city would that, was it a specific city or just any cities?
well, at that time it would have been Da Nang.
Okay. All right, and then when you were on your stingrays, and it was just the group of you, were you using any kind of equipment to sense movement, or was it just observation with your eyes?
We had binoculars
Okay,
or small telescope.
all
Yeah,
right,
that was to look, and that was
okay. And then the IED, can you explain that?
well, that's what the explosive, like improvised explosive device,
Because they used
And
it all
they-
the time in Iraq and Afghanistan.
and they still had them then. In World War II, they had them, and
Could that be anything that just
anything that will
explodes?
boom.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's what I had.
All right. Well, thank you very much then for coming in and sharing your story today.
You're welcome.